The night sky above the Valari homeworld was black and silent. There were no bright trading ships in orbit, no friendly signals, and no warm greetings between stars. There was only darkness. Elder Tyron stood inside the main hall of the Great Council. His eyes moved slowly over the map that floated in the air. The map showed the whole sector. Red marks spread like fire across the edges of the Union space. Each red mark was a destroyed colony. Each red mark was a lost world. The Zor had come without warning. Their ships had appeared on the outer rim and burned everything in their path. They had destroyed spaceports, stations, farms, cities, and even peaceful mining worlds. The Union of Worlds had sent messages to the nearest empires. They had begged for help. They had begged for ships, soldiers, or even supplies. No one answered. The great fleets of the Archon closed their borders. The proud Voran Empire turned off their beacons. Even the neutral traders refused to fly through the war zones. One world after another fell. The Union of Worlds was falling apart. Inside the council hall, the voices of the leaders echoed with fear and anger. "They are not coming," said Governor Rena. "The other empires do not care. They will wait for the Zor to destroy us and move on. We must surrender." Another leader shouted. "We cannot fight them alone. Their ships are stronger than ours. Their numbers are too many. If we fight, we die." Elder Tyron listened to every word. He was old and wise, but he had never seen fear spread so fast. He looked at the young guards standing at the back of the room. Their hands shook. Their armor looked clean and new. They had never fought in a real war. Tyron raised his hand and the room became quiet. "We have sent every message we can. If we surrender, the Zor will still burn our world. They do not make peace. They do not leave survivors. We must keep calling. Someone out there must hear us." Rena slammed her hand on the table. "Elder Tyron, you hope for something that will never come. Who will save us? The Archon do not care. The Voran will not move. The traders are gone. Who is left?" Tyron looked at the empty star map. His voice was calm. "Someone will answer." Outside the council hall, the city of Vera was broken and tired. The once bright towers now had cracks and burns from the last Zor attack. Children stayed inside shelters. Drones moved through the sky carrying water and food to the remaining families. The wind carried the sound of sirens. The Zor had not reached the Valari homeworld yet, but everyone knew they were close. The Union's main fleet had been defeated 3 systems away. There was no strong wall left. The enemy would come soon. Inside the old signal tower, Operator Kell sat in front of dozens of silent screens. He was the last signal operator left. Others had been sent to the front line or had left with their families. Kell was young, but he was loyal to his duty. He pressed the broadcast key again and again. "Mayday, this is Union Station Vera. We are under threat. We call for any friendly ship. We call for any ally. Please respond. We request help." The only answer was static. Kell leaned back in his chair and looked up at the night sky through the wide window. He had grown up hearing stories about how the Union was strong and united. He had believed that no world would ever be left alone, but now, sitting in the empty tower, he felt small and forgotten. He pressed the broadcast key again. On the 3rd night, the Zor scouts were spotted near the border. The Valari Defense Force prepared its few ships. The citizens began to leave the capital. Ships full of refugees lifted off from broken launch pads. The sky was filled with gray smoke and slow engines. In the middle of this fear, Elder Tyron walked through the evacuation zone. He moved with his old wooden cane, but his steps were firm. He looked at every child and every soldier. He spoke to people with a steady voice. He did not lie to them. He told them the truth. The Zor were coming, but they must not lose their hope. As he reached the edge of the platform, he looked at the horizon. He remembered the old days when the stars were full of travelers. He remembered the festivals when ships from other worlds came to their ports. It was a warm memory, and it hurt to think that those days might never return. Inside the war room, the military council gathered around the last strategy table. Commander Nail explained the situation. His uniform was torn, his hair gray from stress, but his eyes were sharp. "The Zor fleet is expected to reach our orbit in 7 cycles, he said. "We have less than 100 working ships. Most of our stations are damaged. If we fight alone, we will lose. We need outside help. Without it, our world will fall." The council was silent. No one argued. Everyone knew it was true. Rena spoke again, her voice softer now. "There is no one left to help us. But before the meeting ended, a small sound came from the signal channel. It was faint at first. Then it grew stronger. Everyone turned to the screen. Kel's voice came from the tower. "We have received a signal. It is not static. It is a human code." The room froze. Elder Tyrion frowned. "Humans, are you sure?" Kel answered, his voice trembling. "Yes, Elder, it is old Terran frequency. I am decoding it now. Humans were not part of any major empire. They were a small but stubborn species from a distant blue world called Earth. They did not have a large empire or powerful colonies. Many considered them weak. They were known for trading, building small stations, and traveling far but alone. No one expected them to get involved in the war. The sound cleared and a calm voice filled the war room. "This is Earth Command Fleet 9. We received your signal. We are moving to your location. Hold your ground." For a moment no one spoke. The words were simple. They were not promises of power. They were not full of grand speeches. But in that silence they felt stronger than any speech. Someone had heard. Someone was coming. Elder Tyrion closed his eyes. His old hands tightened on his cane. He had spent weeks listening to silence. Now he heard a voice that carried courage. He turned to the council and spoke slowly. "Prepare the defenses. Tell the people, help is coming." Outside, Kel listened to the same message over and over again. He replayed it to be sure it was real. The voice was human. It was steady, firm, and calm. He had never met a human in his life, but he felt as if a great wall had been built between the Volari and the Zhor. The refugee ships stopped leaving. Families gathered in the streets to listen to the broadcast. Soldiers who had lost hope began to check their weapons again. Engineers returned to the broken walls and started repairs. Something changed in the air. When the next night came, the sky above Vera was still black, but it no longer felt empty. The Union beacon flashed for the first time in months. A new signal was added to the map. It came from the human fleet. It was not large compared to the Zhor Armada, but it was moving fast. Rena stood on the balcony of the council hall watching the stars. "Why would humans come here? We have nothing to offer them. We are not part of their world." Elder Tyrion stood beside her. "Perhaps they are coming not for what we have, but for who they are. There is still honor among the stars. There is still kindness." Kel spent the next hours guiding the fleet with beacon lights. The first human scout ships appeared on the outer edge of the system. Their ships were not beautiful like the Voran cruisers or giant like the Archon battleships. They were strong, simple, and built for survival. The people of Vera gathered outside the shelters. They watched the silver lights move slowly across the sky. They had waited for any help. Now they saw it with their own eyes. Commander Raoul of the human fleet sent a final message before entering orbit. "Valerie people, we have heard your call. We will stand with you. You are not alone." Inside the council hall, the leaders listened to the message. No one cheered loudly. There was no grand celebration, but tears filled many eyes. For the first time in months, they felt the weight of fear lift from their hearts. The Zhor were still coming. The danger was still real. But the Volari were no longer alone in the dark. Elder Tyrion looked at the map again. The red mark still covered half the sector, but now there was a new light at the center. It was small but steady. He spoke softly to himself. Someone answered. The stars outside seemed to shine brighter. The wind over the city carried a new sound. It was not the sound of fear. It was the sound of hope. The war was not over. The hardest days were still ahead. But from this moment, the Volari knew that help had come. Humanity had stepped forward when all others had turned away. In the old signal tower, Kel sat back in his chair and smiled for the first time in many nights. He whispered to the sky, "Thank you." The human fleet approached slowly but steadily, like a shield rising against the storm. The galaxy had turned its back on the Volari. But one world, one small world, had answered the call. The sky above Vera turned silver as the human fleet entered orbit. For the first time in months, the dark space was not filled with silence. Dozens of gray warships surrounded the planet. They were built with strong metal plates and heavy engines. They were not beautiful, but they looked ready for any fight. Commander Raoul stood on the bridge of the flagship Valiant Star. He watched the Volari world through the wide window. The planet was covered with smoke, and the lights of broken cities still burned weakly. He had seen many battlefields in his life, but the sight of Vera gave him a strange feeling. These people had called for help when everyone else had stayed quiet. He had heard their call, and he had decided to answer. Behind him, his officers worked at their stations. They checked shields, weapons, and communications. They did not talk loudly. Their movements were fast and sure. The crew had trained together for years. They trusted each other more than they trusted anything else. "Commander, all ships have taken position in orbit," said Officer Mara. "Defense grid is active. We are ready for surface contact." Raoul nodded. "Good. Open channel to the Valari Council." A blue light appeared in front of him, and the image of Elder Tyran formed. The old Valari leader looked tired, but his eyes carried new strength. "Commander Raoul," Tyran said, "your arrival has given our people new hope. You are welcome on Vera." Raoul gave a respectful nod. "Elder Tyran, we are not here for words. We are here to fight. Tell us what your people need." Tyran took a slow breath. "Our cities are weak. Our fleet is small. Our people are afraid. We cannot face the Zor alone." Raoul's voice was calm. "You will not face them alone anymore. We will build defenses. We will prepare the ground. We will stand with you." The channel closed and Raoul turned to his crew. "Send engineering teams to the surface. We will fortify the capital first. Mara, coordinate with their defense council. They must work with us, not around us." The hangar doors opened and landing ships dropped toward the planet. Each ship carried soldiers, engineers, medics, and supplies. Their engines left white trails across the dark sky. On the ground, the people of Vera gathered near the old landing field. The wind was cold, and dust rose as the first human ship landed. Its ramp opened slowly. Human soldiers walked down in black and gray armor. They moved in lines, not in chaos. Their faces were calm. Governor Rena stood near the landing field with a group of Valari officers. She had expected them to look proud or arrogant, but they looked focused and steady. Their leader, Captain Leon, stepped forward. "We are here to build your wall," he said simply. Rena blinked. "What do you mean?" Leon pointed to the damaged defense towers around the city. "You have the bones of a fortress. We have the tools to make it strong again. We will repair and build." The human engineers spread out with machines and scanners. They walked through the broken walls, marking weak spots. They worked side by side with Valari engineers. They shared tools and plans. Within hours, new steel beams rose where old walls had fallen. Children peeked from behind corners, watching the strange new allies. Human soldiers offered them warm packs of food. The children smiled shyly. In the command center, Elder Tyran and Commander Raoul stood together over a large map. It showed the system, the city, and the direction from which the Zor would attack. "They will come from the West Arc," Tyran said. "They destroyed the last Union fleet there. We have no strong shield in that direction." Raoul nodded. "We will place our fleet at that arc. We will turn your city into a shield. The Zor will not pass easily." "They have many ships," Tyran said. "Your fleet is small." Raoul looked at the map. "Small is enough. We fight smart. We do not wait for them to choose the battlefield. We choose it for them." In the following days, the humans worked without rest. They built shield generators on the ground, placed gun turrets around the capital, and set up sensor towers that could detect approaching ships far away. Their work was fast and efficient. Valari engineers who had lost hope began to find strength again. Human soldiers shared their knowledge without pride. They trained Valari guards to fight in teams, to use cover, and to move like a single unit. The training was hard, but the Valari learned quickly. One night, as the wind blew over the half-repaired city, Kel climbed the highest signal tower. He looked up at the stars and saw the human ships floating in silent formation. He remembered the first night when the sky was empty. Now, the sky was full of guardians. A group of human soldiers sat near a small fire, fixing damaged equipment. They were tired, but their faces were calm. Kel walked closer. One of them smiled at him. "You are Kel, the signal operator, right?" the soldier asked. Kel nodded. "You called us," the soldier said. "Good thing you did. You have a loud signal." Kel laughed softly for the first time in months. "I thought no one would hear." "We heard," the soldier replied. When someone calls, we listen. That is how it works for us. As the days passed, a quiet bond grew between the two species. The Valari began to trust their human allies. They saw that the humans did not demand anything in return. They did not ask for land or riches. They worked, trained, and planned as if this was their own fight. Governor Rena visited the human camp one morning. She found Captain Leon training a group of Valari guards. He was showing them how to move through ruins without making noise. She watched as the Valari followed every move carefully. "You fight with discipline," she said to him when the training ended. Leon shrugged. "We fight because we must. If we do not stand together, no one survives." Rena looked at the faces of the Valari guards. For the first time, she saw something new in their eyes. It was not fear, it was determination. Meanwhile, in orbit, Raoul prepared the fleet for the first contact. The Zor scouts were getting closer. Their ships were fast, black, and silent. The sensors picked up movement near the border. Raoul walked along the bridge of the Valiant Star. His officers gave reports quickly. "Enemy scouts are 2 days away," Mara said. "Good," Raoul answered. "That gives us time to finish the grid." On the ground, the shield generators activated one by one. A bright blue dome formed over the capital. It was strong and steady. People came out of shelters to see it. The dome looked like a new sky. Children ran through the streets pointing at the light. The fear that had filled the city began to lift. Elder Tiren stood beside Rena on the balcony of the council hall. "I thought they would come here only with words," he said. "But they came with hands ready to work. I was wrong to doubt them." Rena nodded slowly. "They are different. They fight like it is personal, even when it is not their war." In the human command camp, Raoul gathered his officers and Valari leaders around a large table. A 3D map of the system floated in the air. "The Zor will attack soon," Raoul said. "They will not stop at the border. They will try to break the shield and burn the city. But they do not know we are ready." Tiren listened carefully. "How do you plan to face their fleet? They have more ships." Raoul's voice was calm. "They have numbers. We have discipline. We fight smart. We use every angle and every second. Our ships are smaller, but faster. We will control the battlefield." Mara explained the plan. The human fleet would form a wide shield line at the West Arc. The Valari defense towers would support from the ground. If the Zor broke through the first layer, they would meet a second wall of fire. If they pushed again, the ground shields would rise and keep the civilians safe. Tiren looked at the map. The plan was daring, but it was strong. "Will your people stay and fight?" he asked. Raoul looked at him without hesitation. "We do not run." The council ended with quiet agreement. Valari soldiers left the room with their heads high. That night, the city of Vera was alive again. Lights shone from windows. People gathered in the streets to watch the human ships move like silver shadows across the stars. The fear that had lived in their hearts for so long was slowly replaced by courage. In the training field, Leon handed Kel a small communicator. "This is linked to our main command net," Leon said. "If the Zor cut your towers, you can still call us with this." Kel held it tightly. "I will not fail." "I know," Leon said with a small smile. "You are the reason we are here." The next morning, the human fleet began final preparation. Fighters launched into formation. Warships locked their weapons. Engineers checked every line of the shield grid. Raoul stood on the bridge, looking at the stars. He could already feel the coming storm. "Commander," Mara said, "we are ready." Raoul nodded. "Then we wait for them to come. And when they come, we will make them remember why they should fear those who stand together." On the ground, the Valari watched the sky as the human ships moved into position. The world that had once been abandoned by the galaxy now had protectors above it. Elder Tiren walked through the streets, speaking to people, giving them strength. He told them that courage does not belong to one world alone. It belongs to all who choose to stand. Kel sat in the signal tower, listening to the quiet hum of the human frequency. It was a steady sound like a heartbeat. He knew the storm was coming. But he also knew they were not alone anymore. The stars above were no longer silent. The Zor fleet was close, and the humans were waiting. The sky above Vera turned silver as the human fleet entered orbit. For the first time in months, the dark space was not filled with silence. Dozens of gray warships surrounded the planet. They were built with strong metal plates. The stars above Vera were calm, but everyone knew the storm was coming. The human fleet held its line at the western arc. The Valari defense towers glowed blue under the night sky. The air was filled with the steady hum of shield generators. It was the sound of hope and fear mixed together. Inside the signal tower, Kel stared at the screens. Small red marks appeared at the edge of the star map. He leaned closer. The red marks grew larger. They were moving fast. "They are here," Kel whispered to himself. He grabbed the communicator that Leon had given him. "This is Kel. Zor scouts are on the outer edge. They are coming straight to the west arc." The answer came at once. It was Commander Raoul's voice. "We see them. Stay calm. Do not break signal." Across the capital, alarms began to ring. People moved quickly into shelters. Soldiers took their positions at the walls. Human fighters lifted off from their stations like a silver swarm. Valari gunners stood ready at the defense towers. The city that had once waited to die now waited to fight. In orbit, the human fleet formed a wall of steel. The Valiant Star stood at the center. Smaller frigates and fighter carriers lined both sides. Behind them, the defense grid shimmered like a blue wave. Raoul stood on the bridge. His crew watched their screens. The Zor ships were still far, but their numbers were growing fast. Mara gave the first report. "Zor fleet count is increasing. First wave is 50 scout ships and 20 attack cruisers. Second wave is still forming behind them." Raoul's voice was steady. "Lock all weapons. No one breaks formation. We hold the line." The first Zor ships entered the system like a black tide. Their hulls absorbed light. Their engines burned red. Their formation was not perfect, but their numbers made up for it. They moved like predators hunting their prey. Inside the city, Elder Tyrion stood near the main bunker entrance. He watched the human ships from the balcony. The sight of the fleet made him feel strong. For many nights he had only seen silence. Now he saw courage. Rena walked to his side. "Do you think they can win?" she asked. Tyrion answered slowly. "They will not fall easily. I believe in them." Above them, the first battle began. Human fighters moved like arrows through the black sky. They met the Zor scouts head-on. Bright lines of fire filled the stars. The battle looked like a storm of light and metal. In the middle of the chaos, human pilots spoke to each other with calm voices. "Target on left is mine," one pilot said. "Copy that," another answered. They moved with precision, not fear. Their small ships were fast. The Zor scouts tried to circle them, but the humans were ready. They broke the first wave apart. Explosions lit the darkness. On the ground, the Valari soldiers watched the battle on large screens. Cheers rose when Zor ships fell. For the first time in many months, they believed the enemy could be beaten. Raoul gave new orders. "Push fighters forward. Keep cruisers behind the shield line. If they break through, we meet them with everything we have." The second Zor wave arrived. It was much larger. Heavy attack cruisers joined the scouts. Their weapons glowed red. They fired without warning. The blue shields of the human fleet flashed as the energy blasts hit. "Shields holding," Mara said. "But pressure is rising fast." "Then we give them something to remember," Raoul said. Human cruisers opened fire. Heavy railguns shot streams of burning light. Missiles streaked across the battlefield. Shore ships twisted and turned, but the human line did not move. Kel sat in the tower, his hands gripping the table. He could hear the calm voice of the human commander through his small communicator. It made him feel like the world was not ending. It made him feel safe. Down at the walls, Captain Leon led the Valari guard teams. They stood behind the barricades, watching the sky. Leon's armor was dusty and scratched. He looked at his soldiers with steady eyes. "They will try to land ground units," he said. "When they come down, we stop them here. This city is not theirs." Valari soldiers nodded. They were no longer shaking. Their hands held their weapons firmly. As the fleet battle grew fiercer, a group of Zor ships broke from the main line. They turned toward the planet. They were going to land. "Raoul, they are slipping through," Mara warned. "I see them," Raoul said. "Send 2 wings after them. Ground teams get ready." Leon raised his rifle. "Here they come!" he shouted. The sky above the capital flashed red as Zor dropships entered the atmosphere. The shield dome stopped some of them, but a few got through. They hit the outer streets hard. Fire and smoke rose. Valari soldiers moved forward with human soldiers beside them. The ground battle began. The Zor were tall and cold. They moved like machines. Their weapons were sharp and brutal. But the humans did not step back. They moved in tight groups, covering each other, firing with precision. Leon led the first charge through the broken street. He gave quick hand signals. Valari soldiers followed without hesitation. The first dropship cracked open. Zor warriors rushed out. The air filled with the sound of fire. Human and Valari lines held firm. One by one, the enemy fell. Up above, the human fleet was still fighting hard. The second wave of Zor cruisers pressed the line, but the human ships kept their formation tight. Raoul did not panic. "Do not break," he said. "If they push, we push back harder." His voice echoed through every ship. Pilots and gunners moved with steady hands. They had trained for this kind of fight. On the ground, the battle raged from street to street. Leon saw a Zor warrior rush at a group of young Valari soldiers. He ran forward and blocked the attack. His armor took the hit, but he did not fall. He struck back fast, knocking the enemy down. The young soldiers looked at him with wide eyes. Leon shouted, "Do not freeze. Stand your ground." They followed his lead. Meanwhile, Kel worked without stopping. He kept the signal link stable between the city and the fleet. When a Zor jamming signal tried to cut their line, he switched to a backup channel. He refused to let silence return. Tyrion stayed near the shelters, speaking to frightened families. He told them about the human promise. He told them about strength. He told them to believe hours passed. The sky turned from dark to burning red. The battle had reached its peak. "Third wave of enemy ships incoming," Mara said. Raoul stood straight. "All ships tighten the line. We hold." His words were not loud, but they gave strength to everyone who heard them. In the streets, Leon and his mixed team of humans and Valari pushed the Zor back. They fought block by block. Smoke filled the air, but they did not fall back. Kel's hands were covered in sweat. He spoke into the communicator. "They are still fighting. The fleet is holding. The city is still standing." Raoul looked at the star map. The Zor fleet was bigger than his. They had more firepower. But they did not have unity. The humans and Valari fought as one. That was their strength. "Now they see what it means to face people who stand together," Raoul said. The Zor began to falter. Their scouts were gone. Their first two waves had failed to break the line. Their dropships on the ground were surrounded. One final cruiser tried to break through the center. Raoul gave the order. "Focus fire." Every human ship fired at once. The cruiser exploded in a bright light. In the streets, the remaining Zor warriors turned back. The human and Valari teams chased them out of the city. Cheers rose through the smoke. Kel looked at the sky. The black ships were retreating. "They are pulling back," he said. Leon raised his weapon high. His soldiers cheered with him. On the bridge of the Valiant Star, Mara gave the final report. "Enemy fleet is retreating to the outer edge. We have won the first battle." Raoul did not smile, but his eyes softened. "Good, but they will return. And we will be ready again." Down in the capital, Elder Tyrion stepped out of the shelter and looked at the rising sun. The city was scarred, but it was alive. People came out of the bunkers and hugged each other. For the first time in months, Vera had survived an attack. Rena walked through the streets, watching human and Valari soldiers work together to clear the rubble. She spoke softly to Tyrion. "We did not just survive. We fought back," Tyrion nodded, "because they came." Above them, the human fleet stayed in formation. They did not celebrate loudly. They simply held their line, ready for the next battle. Kel climbed to the top of the tower again. He listened to the quiet hum of the human signal. It was still there, strong and clear. He whispered to the sky, "Thank you." Far away, at the edge of the system, the Zor fleet regrouped. Their main dreadnought had not yet moved. The real storm was still coming, but Vera was ready now. The humans were ready. The line had held. The first battle had ended with victory, but no one celebrated for long. The Zor were still out there. Their main dreadnought, a ship larger than any human cruiser, waited at the edge of the system. It did not attack during the first wave. It was watching. Commander Raoul stood on the bridge of the Valiant Star. His eyes were fixed on the star map. A single massive red mark glowed at the far corner. It was the dreadnought. Mara gave the report. Enemy main ship is holding position. It is not moving yet. Raoul understood what it meant. The Zor were gathering their strength. The first wave had been a test. The real attack would come soon. Tell all ships to repair and reload, Raoul said. We cannot give them time to grow stronger. If they bring the dreadnought close, we face a storm. On the ground, the city of Vera was filled with movement. Human and Valari engineers worked side by side, repairing the damaged towers. Soldiers replaced broken weapons. The air was full of the sound of hammers, engines, and boots. Elder Tyrion walked among the people. They were tired but not broken. Their fear had changed into purpose. They were no longer waiting for rescue. They were preparing for war. Governor Rena stood at the wall with Captain Leon. She watched the rising shield dome. I used to think we were weak, she said. But today we fight like giants. Leon looked at her. Because giants stood with you. Kel returned to his tower. The screens were full of signals from the human fleet. Repair ships moved between cruisers. Fighter wings rearmed for the next attack. Hours passed. The sky turned red with the light of the setting sun. Then the signal came. The dreadnought was moving. Kel's voice reached the fleet command. The main ship is on approach. It is huge. It is coming straight for the West Arc. Raoul listened without fear. All ships to battle stations. The human fleet moved into formation again. The Valari defense towers locked onto the sky. The dreadnought approached slowly. It was so large it looked like a mountain floating through space. Its dark surface reflected no light. It carried hundreds of weapons and hundreds of fighters. Mara whispered the numbers. Their ship is larger than anything we have faced. Raoul's voice stayed calm. Then we make it fall. The dreadnought opened its first attack with a massive beam of energy. The human shields flashed bright blue as the beam hit. The ground shook under the force. Kel held onto his chair as the tower trembled. Shields holding, Mara said. But we cannot take many hits like that. Raoul nodded. All ships focus fire on their escort fleet. Take out their wings first. The human fighters and cruisers surged forward. They moved like a wall of light against the black swarm of Zor ships. Explosions filled the sky. On the ground, the Zor dropships began to fall again. Leon and his soldiers rushed to their positions. Do not let them pass the outer wall, he shouted. The Valari soldiers answered with strong voices. They were no longer afraid. The dreadnought's fire was relentless. The shield dome began to shake under the impact. Raoul, Mara warned. Shield levels dropping fast. Raoul already had a plan. Activate pulse grid. Overload if needed. We do not let them through. His engineers had linked the city's power core to the fleet grid. If they released it at the right moment, the pulse could tear through the enemy line. But it was dangerous. If they failed, the shield would collapse completely. On the ground, Leon's team held the streets. Zor warriors tried to break through, but they met human and Valari lines working as one. Every corner was defended. Every street was covered. In the control center, Elder Tyrion stood beside the human engineers. What are you planning? He asked Raoul through the communication line. Raoul answered without hesitation. We will strike their heart. The human fleet moved closer to the dreadnought. It was risky, but Raoul knew they could not win by staying behind the shield. He sent a small strike team of fast ships around the enemy line. Their goal was to reach the dreadnought's weak point near its power core. Mara followed the movement. They are in position. Good, Raoul said. Fire the pulse on my mark. The dreadnought charged its main cannon again. The sky turned white with heat. Before it could fire, the human pulse hit. A wave of energy tore across space. The dreadnought's shields cracked. Parts of its outer hull exploded. The strike team hit its core with everything they had. On the ground, Kel watched the blast on his screens. The entire sky lit up. The Zor dropships began to fall apart. Their lines broke. Raoul did not shout in victory. He gave one last order. All ships fire everything. The fleet unleashed a storm. Missiles and beams hit the dreadnought from all sides. Its giant frame shook. A massive explosion followed. The mountain-sized ship began to break apart piece by piece. The Zor fleet lost its leader. The remaining ships turned and fled into the dark. In the streets, the Valari soldiers saw the black ships retreating. Leon raised his weapon high. They are running. A roar of cheers filled the city. In the signal tower, Kel fell back into his chair, breathing hard. The human signal was still strong. On the bridge of the Valiant Star, Mara said the words everyone had waited for. The dreadnought is destroyed. The fleet is retreating. We have won. Raoul looked at the map. The red marks were fading. Good work, he said simply. Down in the capital, Elder Tyron stood on the balcony. The sky above was filled with the light of burning enemy ships. His people gathered in the streets. They raised their hands to the sky. Rena walked beside him. We are free, Tyron nodded slowly. Because they came. Human soldiers stood with Valari soldiers on the wall. There was no barrier between them anymore. They were one force now. Kel climbed to the top of the tower and looked at the stars. For the first time in many months, he saw them without fear. The Zor had thought the Valari were alone, but humanity had answered their call, and humanity had fought with everything they had. The first light of morning touched the city of Vera. The sky was no longer filled with enemy ships. The Zor fleet had fallen back. The largest dreadnought was gone. The air was quiet for the first time in many weeks. The human ships still floated in formation above the world. Their hulls were dark from battle, but they stood strong. Elder Tyron walked through the capital with slow steps. The streets that were once full of smoke and fear were now filled with people helping each other. Buildings were damaged but standing. The shield domes were still bright above the city. Human soldiers and Valari workers moved together, lifting metal, clearing rubble, and fixing towers. It no longer felt like two separate forces. It felt like one. Governor Rena joined him as they reached the main square. Her uniform was torn at the shoulder from the fight, but her head was high. Around them, children carried water, guards repaired walls, and human engineers worked on power lines. Tyron looked around. They came from so far, yet they stand with us even now. I did not believe such strength existed, Rena nodded. They fight because they choose to, not because they must. That is their strength. Above them, the fleet slowly moved into new positions. Medical and supply ships came down toward the surface. Fighter wings returned from patrols. The people of Vera lifted their eyes whenever they saw a human craft fly over. The fear that had once burned inside them had changed into respect and trust. In the human command center, Commander Raoul stood over the large table. The map that once showed waves of enemy forces now showed calm space. His officers worked quietly, sending signals to all units. The cost of the battle was heavy, but they had achieved something many thought was impossible. They had stopped the Zor at Vera. Mara walked up beside him. All units report stable. Medical teams are helping on the surface. Our wounded are being treated in orbit. The Zor have left the sector. No sign of immediate return. Raoul looked at the map. Good, keep the patrols active. We will not let them surprise us again. He stepped outside the command room and looked through the wide glass at the stars. The memory of the battle was still fresh. He remembered the moment when their pulse cannon had fired and the dreadnought had shattered. He remembered the voices of his crew when the shields had almost failed. He remembered the faces of Valari fighters who had stood their ground with courage. For Raoul, this was not just another mission. This was proof that even a small fleet could make a difference when it stood for something greater than itself. On the surface, Captain Leon stood with Kel at the top of the rebuilt signal tower. The tower that once sent a desperate call for help now carried strong signals across space. Kel touched the new control panel. This tower was broken when I sent the call. I thought no one would hear. Now it reaches every corner of the sky. Leon smiled. A single signal can change everything when someone decides to listen. Kel looked at the horizon. He could still see the marks of the battle. He could still hear the memory of the Zor engines. But he also saw the new towers, the repaired shields, and the human soldiers walking among Valari workers like brothers. Down below, Rena addressed a crowd in the square. Her voice was strong. For many years, we believed we were alone. We called for help and no one answered. But then the humans came. They stood beside us when the stars turned dark. They fought not for power, not for reward, but because they chose to. They reminded us what hope looks like. We will never forget this. The people raised their hands in salute. Human soldiers who stood at the edges of the square returned the salute with quiet respect. Later that day, Elder Tyron visited Raoul on the flagship. He walked through the long metal halls guided by Mara. The human crew stopped to bow their heads slightly as he passed. When he entered the command room, Raoul greeted him with a firm handshake. You have given us more than defense, Tyron said. You gave us a future. My people will speak of this day for generations. Raoul shook his head. You gave yourselves this future. We only stood with you. No, Tyrion said firmly. You came when no one else did. That is something we will never forget. They stood by the window together. The blue planet turned slowly beneath them. The city sparkled with light. Above, the fleet looked like a wall of silver guardians. Raoul spoke quietly. The Zor will not forget this either. They may return one day. Tyrion nodded. Then they will find us stronger than before. Because now we know we are not alone. Raoul turned to him. You should not depend on us forever. We will help you build. You must grow strong. You must become your own shield. Tyrion smiled. We will, but we also know that when someone calls for mercy, the humans will answer. That is enough to give hope. As the days passed, rebuilding continued. Human medics treated Valari civilians with the same care they gave their own. Valari workers helped fix damaged human ships. Joint patrols flew over the horizon, making sure no Zor scouts returned. One night, a celebration was held in the main square. Fires were lit, music filled the air, and people shared food. Human soldiers sat beside Valari guards, sharing stories of their homes. Children climbed on the shoulders of soldiers, laughing. The fear that had ruled their lives was slowly fading. Kel stood near the signal tower with Leon. Do you think your people will leave soon? Kel asked. Leon looked up at the sky. Yes, we cannot stay forever. But we will not forget this place. And if you ever call again, we will hear you. Kel smiled. I believe that now. Raoul also stood at the edge of the crowd. He was not a man who liked big celebrations, but seeing both species together gave him quiet pride. This was the real victory, not just the fall of the Zor fleet, but the rise of something stronger than fear. Mara walked up beside him. Command has approved our next movement. We will stay in the system for 2 weeks to help rebuild, then move to patrol the outer border. Other worlds have heard the story. They are calling for alliances, Raoul nodded. Good, that is how it should be. No world should be alone. The Valerie Council declared the day a remembrance day. Every year from that point on, they would light a single beacon into the sky. That beacon would carry one message in every language. When we begged for mercy, the humans answered the call. The beacon was lit for the first time at sunset. It shot a bright golden beam into the sky, reaching far beyond the atmosphere. It was not a signal of fear anymore. It was a symbol of unity. As the light rose, Raoul stood with Tyrion, Leon, Kel, and Rena. They watched the golden line stretch into the stars. Rena spoke softly. For so long we thought the galaxy was a cold place. Now I know it only needed someone to listen. Raoul crossed his arms. Sometimes one answer is enough to turn darkness into light. Kel placed his hand on the communicator Leon had given him during the battle. It was scratched and worn, but it was the proof that someone had heard him. 2 weeks later, the fleet prepared to leave. The people of Vera gathered at the landing fields. Human soldiers packed their gear. Ships powered up their engines. Elder Tyron stepped forward to give a final speech. You came from a distant world with no promise of reward. You came when everyone else stayed silent. Because of you, we still stand. We will carry your name with honor. If the stars ever grow dark again, we will not beg alone. We will stand with others just as you stood with us. Raoul bowed his head slightly. We did what needed to be done. That is enough. The human soldiers began to board their ships. Kel ran forward and raised his hand. Leon turned and saluted him. As the engines roared, the fleet slowly rose into the sky. The crowd watched in silence. They did not cry. They did not feel abandoned. They knew the bond was not broken. It was stronger than distance. High above, the ships moved into formation and jumped into the deep black of space. Their lights faded slowly, leaving behind a sky full of stars. Kel stood on the signal tower again. The communicator in his hand was silent, but he knew it could bring them back if needed. Governor Rena walked up beside him. They are gone, Kel nodded. But they will hear us if we call. Rena looked at the stars. Yes, and next time maybe we will also be ready to answer when someone else calls. Months passed. The city was rebuilt stronger than before. New towers, new defenses, and new hope filled the streets. Children who once hid in shelters now played in the open fields. The beacon still burned each night. The story of the humans spread across the stars. Other species who had once ignored the call began to speak again. New alliances formed. Worlds that had been divided started to share plans for defense. The Zor had not been destroyed completely, but they had learned something. They had learned that humans did not ignore cries for help. Commander Raoul and his fleet became known across the galaxy, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as those who answered. Back on Vera, Elder Tyrion recorded the final lines of the great event. We begged for mercy and only the humans answered the call. That single answer changed everything. The day they came, the stars became brighter. We will never forget, and if someone else cries for help one day, we will be the ones to answer. Kel listened to the wind at the top of the signal tower. It carried no fear anymore. It carried hope. He looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, the human fleet was flying toward another world, another call. And he knew with all his heart that someone would always answer.